You've never truly been hungry until you've jumped out of your car in the middle of the night on a dirt road and kicked a rabbit to death so you could eat it. So me and Bob got down there and ended up living in that concession stand mobile home. And we ran out of money, and we realized we were going to starve to death. Literally. We had no money and no food. None. We didn't even have milk or flour or anything. There was just... We had no food, and we were looking at, the Sullivans were away somewhere, and we were there by ourselves, and I started going around to people that I knew, like Dickie too, Enoch's son-in-law, and I went to his place and said, boys, we're in hard shape, we have nothing to eat, and we're back there in that trailer, and we don't know what's going on, and Enoch and Margie's not home, and there doesn't seem to be any gigs in the books, and blah, 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 and poor old Dickie, he came through for us, but he only gave us, I think $25, and I think Emmett kicked a few dollars into us, and we had $25 or $30, and it was so bad, before we had gone to try to find some money, like cigarettes only cost 99 cents, and we could only afford to buy one pack between the two of us, and was making it last days. And that's all we had, and we did that with change we found laying around. So it was pretty desperate. But we managed to go. We went into town, and we were running out of gas. We couldn't put gas in the car, but we managed to go down into Jackson, into the Piggly Wiggly, the supermarket down there, and we got some flour and some canned goods and a little bit of coffee, and so we go back to the house, and we had some canned food and a little bit of canned food, and Bob made biscuits, makes the best biscuits in the world. A little bit of milk, some milk and stuff, and we were, trying to make it through that way, but that ran out after a while, and along the way we found a .22 rifle in the trailer, in the closet, and a box of shells, and we decided, well, this place is full of rabbits. We might as well go see if we can shoot a rabbit. And so we were literally out at night with a flashlight and a .22 rifle, jacking rabbits. And we only managed to shoot one. And there's not a lot of meat on a rabbit in Alabama, but we took it home and skun it and cut it up and fried it and ate it, just right out of the frying pan. It was delicious. And so there was one night we were still pretty hungry, and we were coming down we had gone out for something, to see somebody or do something, and we saw a rabbit sitting in the middle of the road, and I gunned the car and ran over it. But I didn't hit it with the wheels, it just stunned it. So I looked in the rearview mirror, and it was just sitting in the middle of the road, kind of stunned, sitting up like it was when I hit it. And I jumped out of the car and ran back and kicked it in the head and killed it. Took that back, cut it up and ate it, and fried it and ate it. Like it was like this. This is ridiculous. But this is what we were reduced to, this level of poverty. And this was going to be no, this was not going to be anything out of the norm. For the next couple of years, for me especially, and Bob. But, so that's where we were at. We were just not in very good shape. The work wasn't there. Bob was a talented guy. He was a mechanic and a truck driver, and just a guy that everybody loved. Everybody down there loved him. They called him Old Bob. Hey, Old Bob. Just loved that guy. And so we just couldn't get anything going on. And so I started looking around. I was meeting up with people I knew, and I was like, somebody said, well, I think I ran into one of the Meharys, the Meharry family, Paul and Belinda and their kids, the family band. Direct competition with Enoch. Started hanging around with them a little bit. And, of course, I started courting their daughter. And so that kind of tied me into them. But I never really did go on the road with them or play shows with them. Paul said he was going to take me out on the road and pay me, but it never really materialized. And so all of that was going on. And then I ran into another Sullivan who became one of my best friends for the rest of my life, Joey Sullivan. And I ran into him through this music store that was in Jackson called the Book and Music Center. And his mother owned it, Alice. She was a tremendously good person. And I just clicked with Joey. Me and Joey became very, very fast friends. And so that was going to come into play in a big way, coming up, as all of these things progressed. And so we were just skinning by. I started to get a few gigs with Enoch. Paul was helping us out financially a little bit. And right near the end of when we moved out of that trailer, we noticed that there was guys coming down in there with guns shooting. Right next to us, all around us in the woods there. I don't know what they were doing. They're just nuts, and they're shooting guns, right? And we got scared because, they didn't know who we were, or might not have even known we were in this place. So I went back to Dickey's, and I borrowed a 12-gauge shotgun. And we put it by the door because we were afraid. Like there was a guy already back there dead. Wayne had died back there under questionable circumstances. And we didn't know what the hell was going on. There was some rumors around that it may have been a drug deal gone bad or maybe whatever. So there was most potentially a murder occurred in this trailer we were living in. So I borrowed this 12-gauge shotgun and I put it by the door and loaded it, put it by the door. So me and Bob were sitting in the trailer one night and we heard this gunshots. And they were getting closer and closer, and all of a sudden there was a truck right in front of the trailer, pulled right up in front, and these guys had guns. Well, I'll tell you what, I never seen anything like it. It was something just like out of a Charles Bronson movie. Bob jumped up off the couch. We had an old black and white TV with rabbit ears. We were watching. All we could get was Love Connection and I don't know what else. I think we watched Star Trek Next Generation is all we could get on the TV. And Bob jumps up off the couch, grabs the 12-gauge, kicks the door open, and leaps off. It was quite high. It was 2 or 3 steps up in the air. He jumps out the door and chambers around into the rifle and fires a shot in the air. Well, these guys in this truck nearly crapped in their pants. They threw their guns on the ground. They were like, don't shoot us, don't shoot us. And Bob was like, what the fuck are you guys doing back here? And they were like, man, we didn't know anybody's living back here. And it turns out they were real nice guys, but they were just maniac redneck Alabamians, right? And it was hilarious. Bob scared these guys nearly to death. And it got around. People started saying, you better not go back in that park because there's a couple of Canucks back there, and they'll blow your heads off. You know, like, it was really funny. But it was just like something out of a movie. And they left. They apologized profusely, and Bob apologized, and and they just left. And long about this time, I was going over to Enix a lot, just trying to see how things were going. We were playing a few shows, and he was paying me, $60 a week, maybe, or $50 or $60 a week. Never got to $100 a week. Of course, me and Bob both trying to live on this money. And I've always had an affinity with dogs, especially vicious dogs. Dogs their owners claim will kill you if you get near them. I was always the guy that would walk right up to them. And there was what they called in Alabama deer dog at Enix Place, basically an Amstaff. But this dog was incredible. It weighed at least 100 pounds, and its head was, easily the width, more than the width of a toaster. It was huge, this dog. This huge square head, and he was red with a white slash down his chest, and white feet, and sleek, and they called him the Red Man. And he was a legend in the county because what he was trained to do, was chase deer through the woods, catch and kill them. And he could do it. He could bring down a full-grown buck and break its neck, grab it by the throat and break its neck. And it would just sit there with the deer until the hunter came. Usually the deer would be wounded, and then the dog would be set out to catch it because it would run. But that's what he did, and he was a legend. He was a legend in that county. He was also a legend for being incredibly vicious. Didn't like people, and he was chained to an old car from the 50s in Enix backyard. I already had a puppy that I got from Dickie too, and she was a little blonde brindle cur hound that I called Johnson because she was quick to act. And there's an old joke, about my mother used to tell about guys getting lined up, soldiers getting lined up on the deck of the ship, and the captain knew, Johnson's mother had passed away, and he didn't know how to tell him. So he lined up all the soldiers on the deck of the ship and said, everybody whose mother's still living, take one step forward. Not so fast, Johnson. That was the joke, right? So I called her Johnson because she was really quick to just do everything. She was a nutcase, a great little dog. And I already had her back there at the trailer. I don't know what I was thinking, because we could barely feed her ourselves, but we managed to get her some Alpo. And so this deer dog, I kept looking at him, watching him, and he was just back there, this chain on him like you'd just find on an anchor on a fucking car ferry. It was that big a chain, no collar. The chain went around his neck with a fastener that fastened the links together. And I said to Enoch one day, I said, "What's the deal with that dog back there?" And he told me. He said, "Yeah, that's the old Red Man. He's a deer dog, but don't go near him, because he'll kill you. He doesn't like strangers, and he's a killer. He's trained to kill animals." And I said, "Is that so?" And so I just left Enoch where he was standing in the yard, and I started walking down towards this dog, and I could just feel Enoch. I could just feel Enoch's buttocks clenching. I could almost hear them. They were clenching up so tight. He was scared, but I wasn't. And I walked down to that dog, and I got within the length of his chain, and I just said, "Hey, Red Man." And he looked up at me, and his eyes were so human. Unbelievable, the intelligence in that dog. And he just got up really slowly and walked over to me, and he smelled my pant leg, and then he just sat down right beside me and looked up at me. And I started loving on him. And pretty soon he was on the ground on his back, and I was rubbing his stomach, and he was, crying and whining and getting excited. And he stood back up, and I was, by this time, I was on my knees, which meant he was taller than me standing up. And he got up really fast, and I thought, well, it's now or never. He's going to kill me because I can't get away from him at this point. He stood up really fast, and he turned around, and he licked me right in the face. And then when he realized he could do that, he just started licking me. Lick, 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 and he just soaked me. And Enoch almost fell out. He's like, what the... He said, I've never seen that dog show any attention or affection to any human being ever. He said, that dog don't have that. And I said, well, obviously it does. I said, listen, what are you doing with this dog? And he said, well, he's too old to hunt, because he was 11 or 12 years old, and he didn't look 11 or 12 years old, but he was. And Enoch said, he's no good to hunt anymore. He's too old to run a deer. I said, well, let me take him back to the trailer. Me and Bob will look after him. And because I wanted him out of there, he was living, chained to a goddamn car. It was horrible. And Enoch said, well, if you want to, yeah, go ahead. So I unfastened the chain off the car, and the dog walked up with me to the Honda Civic, and I got him in the back seat. He didn't know how to get in the car. He was a little worried. I got him in there, and I rolled all the windows down, and I drove him back to the trailer. It took about, 5-minute drive down. Dog was just freaking. He was like looking out the window, and he's smiling, and his tongue was out. And got him back to the house, and he met Johnson. And it was the funniest thing ever. He just looked at the little puppy, which was like a fifth his size, and he adopted that dog. It's the only way to put it. It was like an instant acceptance. Johnson just went to him and started loving on him and smelling him, and he just kind of, the little snubby, he had this little thumb tail, little cut-off tail, and that was going back and forth like mad. And pretty soon, during the evenings, me and Bob would have these two dogs in the house, and they didn't even know how to act. And they were so happy to be around people. So the problem with Red Man is that he was dying of heartworm. And nobody was real sure if he had it, but it started to become apparent that he did. And he did an amazing thing. One morning we woke up, and Red Man was sitting by the door waiting for his breakfast outside. And the puppy had him by the jowls, and she was right off the ground, hanging from his neck. And Red Man was just swinging back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and the puppy was swinging back and forth in midair. And he looked so happy. He just was like rocking her, and she was just holding on, just swinging back and forth, swinging back and forth. It was the funniest thing I ever seen. And he loved that little pup. And so something amazing happened. One day we came home early in the morning we went out for something. When we came back, the Red Man had broken his chain. You could believe this. This dog was tied to the hitch of the trailer with this huge steel chain, and he broke the connector, which was also made out of steel. Broke the connector on the chain out of his chain, and him and the pup were gone. So we were really worried. We were like, okay, we've got the puppy who really can't take care of herself, and Red Man is capable of killing any animal it comes across. What's going to happen here? So we started noticing we could hear them way off in the distance, off to the left of the trailer. And over about 36 hours, we heard that dog and that puppy make a big circle around the trailer, like way off in the distance. You could hear him barking and her yelping, and about nearly 2 days later, they both came back to the trailer, and the puppy had changed. He had taken her out and showed her the world. He took her out. I don't know what if they killed any deer or what they did, but when she came back with him, she was different. She had grown up. It was weird. It was the strangest thing I'd ever seen. And he was so proud of her. You know, he was like, yeah, I took her on a big walkabout and she survived. So it wasn't long after that the Red Man, he started to get up and walk somewhere, and he'd just fall because the heartworms were getting worse. And one day he fell in the driveway, and he couldn't get up anymore, and he was laying there, and he was looking at us, and I said, Bob, we're going to have to put him out of his misery. And he said, yeah, I know. And I said, listen, take the 22. I'm going to go over to Enix really fast and tell him what's happening and get permission, basically, to shoot his dog. So I drove over to Enix, told him. He said, yeah. He said, if that's what's going on, he said, you got to take him, you got to put him down. And so, yeah. So I rushed back to the house, and when I got there, Johnson was sitting off to the side just looking at Red Man, and Red Man was gone. Bob, while I was gone, couldn't stand to see him like that anymore and shot him. And Bob is standing there with the, tears going down his face, and he was a good dog. So we wrapped him up in a sheet and walked him way back in the woods. And we buried him way back there, which was really stupid of us because the entire park was filled with rattlesnakes, water moccasins. And they were all over the place. They were not friendly. And so, yeah, we took him way back, way back. Johnson followed us. And we had a funeral for that old dog. It was amazing. We buried him deep. We put rocks all on top of him, and we built him like a little kind of a headstone off to the side of the trail, where he would have liked, And we had a funeral for an old dog. So it wasn't long after that, I was starting to get pretty desperate for work. And Joey Sullivan, him and his mother owned that music store. And so it turned out that they kind of needed some help there, and there was lots of people around that wanted lessons. So I started going down there to work in the store with Joey and teach music and stuff. And so I started to make a little bit of money. And Joey said, why don't you get the hell out of that trailer and come? We have this little house down by my sister's place, Linda and Dave, his sister and his brother-in-law, great people. And they said, we got this little house, used to be a taxidermy shop. You can live in there, right? And we can set it up and you can live in there. So we did. We went in this little place. It was really weird and strange. It had a kitchen, and it had a bathroom, and a bedroom and a sort of a front room. It was tiny, tiny little house. It was like 18 by 20. I took the master bedroom, which had the bathroom inside it, and Bob slept out on the couch, and that was good. We're fine. Didn't have a stove that worked, and we ended up cooking on one of those camping propane, like it was just one of those things that you put on top of a green propane tank that held a pot or a frying pan or whatever, and that's how we were cooking in this place. We started spending a lot more time around Paul. And one of the things that precipitated it was Enoch just stopped working me. And I think he was a little pissed off that I moved out of his trailer. And maybe a little pissed that I was hanging around with Joey. These people are all related. Like Joey Sullivan was their cousin. And on that goes. Like these people all knew each other their entire lives. And they knew all the socio-political, crap that was going on between all the members of the family. And so we started, kind of hanging around with Paul more. And I was working at the store with Joey, and I was going out to play with Enoch when he would have me. It came around the middle of March. And one day we're sitting at Paul's. And the phone rang. So Paul looks at me and Bob and says, "You need to go to Emmett's. Emmett wants to see you right away." And I said, "What's going on?" He said, "You need to just go over there. He's waiting on you." So I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a gig or something. I thought it had to do with music. Paul had a good poker face. And so we went over to Emmett's, and we walked in the kitchen, and Emmett was sitting there, and he smiled at us. "Hey, boys." And he looked at Bob. He called Bob White, because it's a bird down there, Bob White. And "Hey, Bob White. Hi, Bob White. How you doing? Want a cup of coffee?" And we sat down at the table, and Emmett was smiling and looking at us, and all of a sudden, his face just collapsed. And he looked at us and he said, "Boys, your mama's gone. She passed away." And then Emmett just started bawling, crying. He said, "This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, to tell you this." And the tears are just falling on the table, and I was just in shock. I didn't see any of this coming. Last I'd seen Mother, she was as feisty as ever, but there was one thing that happened that should have clued me in, but I didn't accept it. As much as I disliked my mother for a lot of reasons, I still loved her. She was my mother. But I, didn't want to live with her, didn't want to be influenced by her anymore, didn't want to go through all that crap. But a few days before this happened, she called me at Paul's house, and she was writing me. I get a letter from her almost every second or third day. She was writing letters to me. And they were just the normal fare, talking about her problems and talking about this and telling me all the things that I need to do to stay safe and not to, don't trust people and don't, she was a very negative individual. But she called me a few nights before this all happened and got me on the phone, and she talked to me for about an hour. And she said to me, "I'm going into the hospital because they think I have a blockage in my bowel, and I have to go do this test where they make you swallow all these little plastic pieces of thing that are different shapes, and they watch how they go through your system." And she said, "I don't think I'm going to come out of the hospital." And I said, What the hell are you talking about?" She said, "Well, just trust me. I'm going to die." But she'd been saying that for years, all of her life. She was going to die, she's going to die, she's going to die. So she kept me on the phone for about an hour, and it was the most interesting conversation I ever had with her. And it immediately reminded me of what just happened with Johnson and Redman. And I know that's a strange thing to say, but it was almost a mirror image. She was the most lucid I had ever heard her, and she basically told me the secret of life. It was a long, calm, succinct conversation where she basically said, these are all the things that I did wrong in my life. And I'm sorry for them now, but there's no way to change them. So the only way that anything can move forward from my ending is that you know the things that I did wrong, and hopefully you'll never make these same mistakes. And she imparted all this knowledge, like it was profound. It was profound. And to be honest with you, I can't really remember the specifics of it. Because at the time, I was just thinking, she's not really dying. I don't know why she's doing this. But it was going in my head, and it was sticking in there. And she laid out her entire life and mine, and the children that she lost or denied, 3 of them. You know, that 2 she gave, 2 she gave for adoption, and 1 she left behind in Shetty Camp. And she laid it all out on the table. And at the end of the conversation, I remember I just said, okay, well, look, I don't think you're going to die, but I love you. Don't worry about dying. You're going to a hospital. The doctor's going to be there. Everything's fine. And she said, yeah. She said, well, and then she said something she never said to me, ever, that I ever remembered. When the phone call ended, she said goodbye. She never said that to me. She always said, see you later, see you soon, talk to you soon, whatever. She said goodbye. And I said goodbye. And I hung up the phone. That was on a Friday. On Sunday morning, I was sitting at Emmett Sullivan's table, being told she was dead. It was heartbreaking and liberating all at the same time. She had been such a negative shadow in my life that her death created this freedom inside me that I had never had before. I was truly free of any of the ugly things that she could do to me. But at the same time, I lost my mother, my last parent. I was now an orphan. I had no family except my brothers, no parents, and no parental home to go back to, no base of operations where I was from. I was out on my own immediately at that second. That was it. My life changed forever. I was like, okay, I'm on my own. As bad as it was living with her, I always could go back there if I had to. But now I had nothing. So, and to make things more interesting, and maybe, I don't know if interesting is the right word, but ironic. When I called Joe at home and tried to find out what the hell happened to her, basically was told that when she went into the hospital, they took all her medications away. And she had been self-medicating with all these crazy drugs for so long that she knew what to take and when to take it to stay alive. She had pills for her heart, she had pills for her mood, she had pills for all this stuff, and they took that away and put her on a regular schedule of these medications. And as soon as they did that, she died of a pulmonary embolism. Her lungs filled with blood clots because her body wasn't getting these medications in the manner that it was used to receiving it, and her system shut down, and she died. Quite possibly a horrible death too, which bothered me. And so the plan then became, one of the things that she told me in this conversation 2 days before she went, she said, "Don't come home when I'm gone." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Don't ever come back here. You don't belong here. You belong down there. And if you come back here, you may never get back where you are now." She said, "So do not come home for a funeral, don't do it. Stay there. You're not going to be able to help me once I'm dead." And all of a sudden, like, all this conversation started to flood back in on my head, like I'm sitting there talking to Joe, and Joe doesn't know, what's going on. And so it then became, okay, what do we do now? So I says to Bob, I said, "Look, she told me not to come back. I thought she was just bullshitting, but she died. She told me 2 days ago she was going to die, and now she's dead. One of the things she told me is not to come back there, and when I'm looking around at what's going on here, I have to agree with her. Like, this might be shitty right now, it might be broke, might be whatever, but I came down here to do music. That's why I'm here. And if I go back, I may never get back here again. I may not ever have enough money. I might not get back across the border or whatever." And Bob's like, "Oh, absolutely, I'll go back." So there was Bob leaving after only 3 months. And we went to Paul. And of course, Paul knew everything was going on. And he said, "I'm going to fly you boys home." And I said, "No, you don't have to fly me home. I'm staying on here. Bob is going to go back and handle everything." And so they said, "Okay, all right, well, that's what you want to do." I said, "Yes, sir, I need to stay on here." And so Bob, Paul, Harry, bless his heart, we took Bob to the Mobile airport, and Paul bought him a ticket to Halifax. And I'll never forget Bob walking up the gangway with a single Adidas bag full of dirty clothes, and got on the plane and went home to do whatever there was to be done, which was nothing. The county put on her funeral, and I guess all the boys ended up at the funeral. I don't know if, I'm pretty sure that they did. So Bob and Joe and David and Jim would have all been there. Possibly Sharon. She had contacted my mother. This was the first girl that my mother had and gave away. She had contacted my mother and tried to talk to her, but my mother denied her. Said she had the wrong woman and all this stuff. It was a nightmare, right? So the family is a nightmare. So anyhow, there I was, alone, with nothing. I had to make these people that were there my family, and they became my family. And Joey and Linda and David, Joey Sullivan became my family, and we went through a lot. We went through his mother dying of brain cancer. Alice passed away from brain cancer in her own bed at home. I was there for that. I sang at the funeral. we went through a lot of things. Joey went through a lot of things that I went through with him. He went through the death of my mother with me, and then my mother and his mother. And we just kept getting closer and closer, and working more and more at the store and teaching more. And somehow the playing kind of got put aside, and I took time in that first year in 1992 to build these fantastic family-like relationships with Joey and his sister Linda and the people around Jackson, Alabama. And some of them I got to know really well were in the black community. And I'll probably leave that till the next episode. But it was a magic time. It was a magic time and a hard time. There's a lot of loss that happened, right from that get-go. A lot of loss, a lot of heartache. But it brought me closer together with a core group of people that would end up highly influencing my life and the choices I was about to make. That would pretty well put me over the top when it comes to being around the musicians and players I really wanted to be around. So, yeah, it was an interesting time. But I still don't like Rabbit to this day.
Troubles and trials often betray those on in the weary body to stray. But we shall walk beside the still waters with the good shepherd leading the way. Those who have strayed were sought by the Master. He once gave his life for the sheep. Out on the mountain, still he is searching, bringing them in forever to keep. We're going up home to live in green pastures, where we shall live and die evermore. Even the Lord will be in that number when we shall reach that heavenly shore. Now we shall not heed the voice of the stranger, for he would lead us on to despair. Following on with Jesus our Savior, we shall all reach that country so fair. We're going up home to live in green pastures, where we shall live and die evermore. Even the Lord will be in that number when we shall reach that heavenly shore. When we shall reach that heavenly shore.